Welcome, everyone. My name is Anit Mukherjee. I'm a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation America. And it's a pleasure to kick off day two. And yesterday already we had wonderful discussions. We heard lots of mention of digital. I think if you have a tag cloud of words, digital would be right up there somewhere. And today, I think the intention is to have a discussion on what digital public infrastructure actually means for different contexts. And that's the motivation of this roundtable. And just to set the stage a little bit, and I'll introduce our speakers, but more like interventions, more like their views rather than a long monologue. And I've mentioned to them it's only about 4 minutes, and then we open it up for a discussion. So the idea of digital public infrastructure has gained currency in recent years, I would say, but it's been it's a pretty established concept. And if you go to the ORF America YouTube channel, you'll find a video of Mr. Nandan Nilekani, who is kind of motivated a lot of these infrastructure in India. And he mentioned that the internet itself was a digital public infrastructure. It was funded by the US government, CERN. Then if we move to more recent applications like GPS, that was also funded by the US government through different channels. And then it was opened up for private innovation. So why is DPI now again kind of coming into this limelight? I think there are a couple of reasons, and we can discuss different reasons and motivations for it. But I think in the recent past, especially in this region in COVID, I think we have realized that a strong digital public infrastructure is important for crisis management as well. Overall, yes, it's important for governance, it's important for private sector engagement, the digital economy, but also there's some work that I did with the World Bank, which showed in Congo, in Kinshasa, within 4 months of the COVID crisis, of COVID lockdowns, they were able to send out money through mobile wallets to 250,000 residents of Kinshasa. Now, if you think about it, it's pretty stunning. I mean, we won't think of a country right at the border which has that kind of an ability and capacity, and that is something that we should be thinking about in this forum. That how this concept, which in some ways India has taken a lead, but I'm sure there are other countries like Brazil and countries in the region, in Kenya, where this has to be contextualized in some way. And how can we think of the next phase of digital public infrastructure, and how can it then stimulate the digital economy, I was there in the dinner conversation, and thank you for a wonderful exposition. How can you create these startups? How can they ride on those rails? And not only in terms of the gig economy, but also in terms of healthcare, education, in all the other social assets. So that's setting the stage, and let me just introduce the speakers. To my extreme left is Mr. Amit Shukla. He runs a wonderful organization, and he will talk to you about that. He's been running it. It's EasyGov, right? And there's an e-governance foundation, and I always say that it's e-governance, so I caught myself. EasyGov, which essentially is a digital public infrastructure idea, but how to reach government services to the most vulnerable. So he will talk a little bit about that, set the context. And then to my left is Arshi Adil, Ms. Arshi Adil, who works for Microsave. She's a senior manager there. And I've worked with Arshi for many years, doing many surveys across India and Bangladesh and other countries. And she will talk a little bit about how she sees that this whole idea of digital public infrastructure, including IDs, payment systems, are actually affecting women in positive or negative ways, because she has that view from the ground. And to my right is Jainaba Sowe. Jainaba is a computer science student from the University of the Gambia. And Jainaba is leading a new initiative that we are trying to start in the Gambia called Open Gambia Initiative, which is essentially start, building a digital public infrastructure from scratch. And Jainaba will tell us a little bit about what she's doing in the Gambia. And to my extreme right is Rajesh Radhakrishnan Menon. I know him as Rajesh Menon, but he's Radhakrishnan, registered here. And Rajesh is the global lead for global strategy at Foundation for Interoperability in Digital Economy. It's called FIDE. It's a long name, so shorten it. FIDE, and they are in the process of implementing something called the Beacon Protocol, which the idea is to move from platform economies to protocol-based economies. And that is something that is part of the digital public infrastructure, and he's also involved in the Gambia project. So without further ado, I hand over the mic to you, sir. Mr. Shukla.
Thank you. Good morning. So I will start with a quick introduction of EasyGov. So there are few terms that you need to understand. First one, social protection. We know that every government using the taxpayer money provide health, housing, education and food support to the vulnerable section of the society. That is social protection. The global expenditure on social protection is $14 trillion. And the error of exclusion, that means the people who are not getting any social protection whatsoever is 54%. 4.2 billion people in this world does not have access to any social protection. That is the amount of error of exclusion in social protection is. Whereas, as I've told you, we spend $14 trillion. So my startup, EasyGov, uses tech as a digital public infrastructure to make sure that this error of exclusion is reduced in social protection. Obviously, government cannot increase the budget. Every economy is in pressure. So, and increasing the budget on social protection sometime ends up the situation like Sri Lanka, where the economy of the country goes down in the burden of providing social protection through debt from the global agencies. To avoid that, you have to manage the social protection in the same money. And for that, you have to reduce error of inclusion in social protection. That is what my startup does. Coming to DPI, it's a very interesting thing that has happened. It started with the tech companies like Microsoft, IBM, Oracle. And then there was a statement that every company has to be a tech company, otherwise they will cease to exist. And then people moved to this, and then they came the age of data company, where you had Google, Facebook, Twitter, and now every company has to be a data company to survive the market, because the data is equal to money and a power. And there the concept of DPI comes at play. If the data is money and power, if it gets concentrated in the hand of only few, that is not good for the world and for the people at large. So DPI, what does, it provides the goodness of technology without doing the aggregation of the wealth, and it empowers each and every individual. So in case of social protection, the DPI can help to reduce the error of exclusion. If you look at the different model of data being used in the world, the US model primarily was data for profit. The China model was data for surveillance. European Union model was data for regulation, whereas India model is data for development. We don't own data. We don't want to monetize the data. We want to give this data in the hand of individuals who are the real owner of the data. If data is a new oil, data is a money, then data belonging to the individual is owned by them, and they have a right to use it the way they want. There shouldn't be any corporate or there shouldn't be a company that is making misuse of the data and making wealth where they are deprived for the services. So I will leave it here, and probably I will come back later on the second part.
Thank you, Mr. Shukla. And the idea is to just throw out some ideas to you and say, like, this whole idea of exclusion error, reducing exclusion error in government services. And it's a global issue. It's not an India issue or an Africa issue or Latin America issue. So how do we think of a digital public infrastructure based concept of reaching services to the poor? And I think we can reflect on that a little bit and come back to it. Let me just turn, by the way, thank you for keeping to the time. We want to keep as much time for the discussion, and we'll definitely come back to the speakers, but we would like to hear more of a discussion. Arshi, I've worked with you for 8 years and in many, many different locations. And you also are somebody who have always told me that, there is an important factor, which is women. Until women are there at the center of any design or any delivery, things will not change. Give us your insights from all the stuff that you've done.
Sure. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I would be talking about India's story of laying the strong foundation of digital public infrastructure through Jan Dhan, through Aadhaar, and through mobile accounts. So back in 2008, India was one of the lowest banked countries in the world, with only 20% banked population. And here we are right now with almost every household having access to a bank account. How all of that happened? And how did women benefited the most out of it? Back then, when this entire foundation was laid, there were a lot of problems, specifically as he was talking about exclusion in social protection. Social protection was rife with challenges leading to leakages, leading to exclusion at every level. How did all of that happen? So India started laying the foundation of Aadhaar, making sure that the entire population, 1.3 billion Indians right now, have an identity, and that impacted women the most. There was a time when women could not apply to any bank accounts, any services. Why? Because the basic problem was they did not have access to identity. So Aadhaar solved that problem. It revolutionized the game where women have access to payments account. Now you go and you will see women making use of transactions and making transactions through QR codes, transferring money instantly. And how all of that happened? Aadhaar is one of the strong pillars that that made this happen. Next came bank accounts. So as I said, very few people, specifically women, had access to bank accounts. And even those who had, that was just a custodian. They were just the custodian owners of their bank accounts, because most bank accounts were being used by men. And in 2014, when this financial inclusion drive was launched in India, 450 million bank accounts were opened, and half of these accounts were owned by women. And that kind of laid a very strong foundation for DBT architecture in India. Sure, that is direct benefit transfers, where government started to ensure that benefits, which is the social security welfare benefits, could reach the bank accounts of women instantly in real time. So mobile was the third third pillar in the game. In 2016, a major telecom player called Jio in India revolutionized this game further by making sure that Indians had access to lowest cost data in the world. There was a time where we could not imagine a woman holding a smartphone, but right now if you go and you see in rural areas, women getting access to bank accounts and making sure that they're able to transfer money and making deposits, making withdrawals through AEPS, which is Aadhaar enabled payment system. So this basically led to three important things. Government also made a very specific note of this and made sure that women were always at the center of the receiving end. So first of all, Aadhaar ensured deduplication, which basically meant that when government allowed or ensured and transferred payments to any beneficiary, any duplicate accounts that were there in the system got removed. And that helped women the most. So I'll talk about one specific example, which is the LPG, liquefied petroleum gas subsidy scheme in India. That through Aadhaar, they were able to remove 40 million fake accounts. And they made a saving. In totality, they made a saving of 30 billion US dollars. And this saving, some of this saving was redistributed to women in the form of new schemes that were targeted specifically on women. A scheme called Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana in India that ensured women had access to clean cooking. It was given to 90 million women in India. So that's how government also used this foundation and started to redistribute some of the savings, some of the efficiency that we were able to achieve with DPIs. Moving on to transactions, there were two important pillars of DPIs in India, which is Aadhaar Payment Bridge and Aadhaar Enabled Payment System. Aadhaar Payment Bridge is when government transfers money instantly to the Aadhaar linked mobile accounts of women. If I talk about a specific example, during COVID-19, Indian government transferred $4.5 of money instantly to the needy people, basically ensuring economic resilience. And one of the strong points was that during COVID-19, when most people were struggling, there were COVID-imposed lockdowns everywhere in India. Government could also ensure that there were schemes like portability that ensured everybody had access to food grains, and that was all possible through the layers of interoperability that the government had laid out. The other thing was an Aadhaar enabled payment system, as I already explained. This allows people to instantly withdraw or deposit money through their Aadhaar linked bank accounts. So these two ensured that women had access to quick banking, and that not only banking, that also opened a plethora of payment services, credit services for women. Now, third thing that I would like to talk about is what was the impact of this. There was some impact in terms of digital spillovers. Very often we've heard that women or basically people only use their bank accounts for withdrawal of cash subsidies, just cash in, cash outs, and they are not able to utilize the entire digital ecosystem. We have very strong evidence. So Microsave and Center for Global Development partnered in 2021, and we conducted a study on primary education stipends program in Bangladesh, and we realized that 74% women, they highlighted how DBT has helped them have more agency and control on their accounts. Not just that, we also did another study in India that said, which was around on 3,000 women beneficiaries that were getting some kind of social assistance from government. So close to 84% women said that there were positive spillovers of the money that they were getting from government. So that shows how this entire DBT ecosystem and the DPIs and the layers of technology that we are building are helping women a lot. And I would just like to conclude by saying that not just banking accounts, women are also using these bank accounts for making more transactions. For example, fund transfers, receiving remittances, and that is also we had a lot of evidence around it from our Bangladesh study as well. That 47% women said that bank accounts or wallet accounts are not only meant to withdraw money, but also to transfer and also to make sure that they're making payments. So this entire DPI ecosystem has laid a strong foundation for direct benefit transfers, majorly impacting women. And I'd like to get back on this if anybody has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Arshi. My personal story is all that she said. It's amazing, and you're seeing out in scale. But the last time I was in India, my mother was complaining that she can't pay the vegetable vendor with her mobile phone. She's 80 years old. She was complaining that this guy only takes cash. So it just kind of hit me in, like, you are complaining that he doesn't take cash or does take cash, right? So it's a complete mind shift that has happened in my 80-year-old mother, who is on YouTube and WhatsApp the whole day, nearly, or 20 hours a day. But I think that is some kind of symptomatic of what both Amitji and Arshi was saying, that there are these digital spillovers. And spillovers happen mostly in economic terms. When we study our economic models, what are public goods? Public goods are goods because there are spillover effects, right? And those spillovers are not captured by the market, and therefore it can't be priced. So I think from an economic standpoint, this is an important economic concept, that why do we call it digital public infrastructure and not digital infrastructure? I think if we reflect a little bit on that, what I'll do is I'll just divide the conversation, and I know there are several questions that you might have or reflections. So let's do a little bit of reflection on the first two, and then we'll come back to Jayanaba and Rajesh, if that's okay. Anybody, just throw the questions, put up your hand, put the mic. There's only one mic, so I will know. You don't need to raise your hand.
Okay, just a reflection on my side, yeah. Hi everybody, my name is Dominique. I'm from Côte d'Ivoire and I live in Ghana, working with Bosch, in charge of the digital transformation in the automotive aftermarket for Africa. Basically, yeah, I like the discussion about digital digital transformation and used for public services. But then, before we move to the step of the soft application, we have the hard equipment, yeah? And my question is actually, where are we putting the concept of balance, accessibility, broad accessibility? Because when in more developed countries, we are talking about 5G, in a country like Guinea, or my friend from Gambia can tell, even 3G is a problem.
In what?
3G is a problem. So are we not creating more and more fragmented environments? And the second question is, we are talking about ecosystem. In the past, in Ghana, it was really widely used, the mobile money application to pay and everything. And today, everybody is like, as my friend said, you said actually, for your mother in the village, would you like to pay by mobile money? No. I just collect cash, because the levy, the tax that the government is putting on this, it's just crazy. So at the end of the day, digital, yes, but the ecosystem all around digitization is a real problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Pablo Marco. I'm a professor at IE University in Madrid, in Spain. I was very interested about this kind of concept about how different countries look at these DPI models, no? Like USA for profit, China for surveillance, Europe for regulation, India for the people. Okay, so how does it translate to the real world? What I mean is, what are the guarantees for the population that the data that the Indian government is storing about the population are not going to be used for other uses? Is there kind of a legal basis, or is like kind of cryptographic basis for this guarantee?
So that's a most fundamental question. And when you talk about social protection, sometimes we say, till the time we don't have a 360-degree view of a family, we cannot decide who is more deprived. And if you have a 360-degree view of a family, then it's a privacy concern. So I think you asked a good question. The way we handle it is, first divide the whole knowledge into three parts. One is the software itself, the code itself. Second is the knowledge, the ontology. And third is data. Keep three into different entity in a separate layer. That is one. Second, you have to build a principle called organs. I will quickly explain, probably we can talk offline later, what organs is. So O stands for open standard. Wherever you are, so that there is an interoperability, so that we don't put all the data at one place. When the need basis, you get the data and you release it. Right? So that for that you have to use O for open standard, R for revocable. Revocable is, it's my choice, my data, I own it. I will decide who will use it, when and for what purpose. G for granular. No global access to data, to anyone, neither to government. Right? It's instance based. A for auditable. Whomsoever is accessing, it has to be auditable and shown to the individual. Right? Everyone will not that learned, but if the person is, they can see who used my data for what purpose. And for notice. Notice to everyone involved in the data exchange. And S is secure by design. So if you follow the organs principle, probably you can get the best of the data without getting into the problem that you said.
Thank you. I think is organ a good, I mean, they come up with these, I don't know how, right? I mean, suddenly you have Jandhan and Jam Trinity and Organ. I mean, the more I come to these meetings and meet people like Avijay, I'm like, when did that come? Where did that arrive? I mean, I have no idea. Anyway, Dominique's question, Archie, I think that's a really critical one. So hard infrastructure Like you've been to villages which are in probably the most remote areas of the country, and you were saying that you still see people use 5G. So what's the takeaway? And I think the tax is quite critical. We might come back later. I have some ideas about that. But Ashi, just that question.
Sure. So I think, Dominic, as you said, that the first step for any countries would need to be political will and ensure that there has to be enough provision and budget that goes into building a very strong foundation of DPIs. If you look at India, when Aadhaar was being built, there was a lot of backlash for Aadhaar also, that it's not proportionate to the uses that it will bring. But look at it, I think close to 30, I'm not sure with the numbers, I'll get back on that, but whatever amount was initially invested in building that infrastructure, we've had more than, multiple benefits. I think close to $2 billion was invested in Aadhaar, but even if I talk about savings, we've only been able to achieve a $30 billion saving just by looking at one sector, which is social welfare. So political will, ensuring taxes, etc., that's absolutely important for the government to take. And in terms of building solutions for those who are most vulnerable, that also has to be a continuous thought. For example, when we started, there were a lot of problems around connectivity. There were many issues around connectivity, and even now, but then the government and the stakeholders that are involved are constantly brainstorming on how we can build alternative mechanisms to ensure that nobody is deprived of their benefits, which are not always entirely digital. So it's digital plus some human intervention that ensures that nobody is vulnerable. And we graduate, that's like a graduation approach. So we graduate to a point where everything becomes digital. But when we start, it's a scattered and it's a mixed approach.
If you want, I will just one line. Yeah, one line. So we were in the same situation that you are in, let's say 20 years back. And then we thought of physical model. So common service center as an access point wherever the broadband is available. So it's a hub and spoke model. People who do not have internet, they can come to this model. So you can build your services in 3 assisted mode. A physical center, an enumerator who is assisting the people, and the kiosk in the government offices. So that is the immediate, and then while you are building this. Coming to the second question, that the people don't transact to avoid the taxes. That's a difficult one, and probably you have to live with that, and slowly and gradually, don't force all transactions to be digital, right? But at least where the government money is going, the taxpayer money is going, we can ensure complete digital transaction on those money.
Awesome. I think Sylvia, is it?
Silvana,
sorry. I'm so sorry. I was there in the meeting. Please do. And then Ambassador Chinoy and I think gentleman here. Yeah, we'll take a round and then just jump.
Okay, very briefly. Hi, everyone. I'm Silvana. I'm from Colombia, though I'm based in Madrid, Spain now. Just to build up on what you were saying, I want to leave a message that should be very clear, is that besides all the good that comes from having women have built their own financial identity or digital identity, it pays to do that. And this is something that you were saying. I just wanted to emphasize that. Besides from all the good, the social good that of course comes with it, it pays for the companies. And I think companies are starting now to realize how profitable and needed that is. You were talking about $30 billion in savings. So that's just a dent on the impact up to a global level that having women own a digital and financial identity has. And just one question for you. You were mentioning some of this before, but you were mentioning that data should be owned by the individuals. I 100% support that. Of course, I also have a startup based on decentralization of data. But I wanted to hear your thoughts on how would that impact, if individuals own and control their data, do you think that has a repercussion on tech development somehow?
I will, hold that thought and think about it. It's a deep question, and I think Rajesh can also talk to that. Ambassador Chinoy, yes, please. Thank you, Silvana, for the intervention.
Thank you very much. So my question really concerns the very nature of the internet, which was described as a digital public infrastructure to start with. And I reckon that as a corollary, all platforms and service platforms are also part of a digital public infrastructure, so to speak. So how do you disaggregate the provision of such services, many of which are global in nature, from the possession and sanctity of data? Now, it is possible that in a particular context like the India stack, you may be able to evolve certain safeguards against the movement of data, possession of data, the legalities, etc. But is it correct to say that when you get onto any platform, which is otherwise global in nature, you are essentially signing up for the potential use of your data by the service provider, unless otherwise ordained through certain regulatory mechanisms, which may not be possible to arrange at a global and international level. And the last point here, which is also a question, is that if data is to be possessed by the individual and individual alone, then how does it impact on the further provision of many other services to the same individual? If his profile, for instance, is not available to the insurance company that may want to access the same stack and see, or the next credit card company that he wants to go to, or to the next bank that he wants to go to for the loan. If data is not available, how do they look at this customer and provide him better service in the future? Could you please reconcile?
Yeah, we will. We'll come back to that. I mean, I also want to keep this side, and Rajesh also has worked a lot on that, and we have this idea of platforms to protocols, and we will come to that. Can you hold it for the next round, and then we can go to Jainaba? And Jainaba is, as I mentioned, I think some of these questions will be answered, Ambassador, in the course of the next couple of presentations, and we'll come back to that as well. Jainaba, you're an amazing lady, and we are very grateful to have you as part of our Open Gambia initiative. Tell us a little bit of your motivation, and what made you think that there is a need for digital public infrastructure in the Gambia, and how do you see this evolve, what you are calling Open Gambia, evolve into something tangible, and what kind of services do you think you should start from?
Hi, my name is Jainaba, so from the Gambia, as Rajesh introduced. As Open Gambia, it's a startup in the Gambia, whereby we are focusing on open protocols, to how we can use open protocols to digitalize mobility and hospitality ecosystem in the Gambia. And what motivates me to be part of this organization is that in our community, like during the COVID-19, we had a lot of issues on mobility and hospitality ecosystem. There is one day I witnessed, sorry.
You're okay.
Like, there is one day I witnessed an issue in our community. There was a problem whereby a lady was in labor at night at 3 a.m. and we couldn't find a ride or a taxi to take her to the hospital. So it was an issue that I was like, what can we do to solve this problem? Because it's a real life thing, and how we can use technology to solve this issue. So I walked from my house to the main road, which is around 5 kilometers, and I was like, wow, like this is a problem. And then unfortunately, the lady gave birth in the house, which is not good and healthy. So with that problem, Open Gambia was introduced in our school, and I was like, okay, I have a similar scenario whereby we can use open protocol to solve this issue. So when FODE was introduced, and they trained us on open protocols and how we can use it to digitalize mobility and hospitality ecosystem. So these are issues that is affecting the Gambia. And then, like, we cannot wait for the government to solve these issues if we are young people, that we can use our knowledge and what we have trained for to solve these issues. Yes.
So, just a quick follow-up, right? I don't think people in this room are really aware of the ground situation in the Gambia. So you mentioned this accessibility and the remoteness, and you felt helpless, right? When you were trying to help this lady. I think what would also be helpful is to understand for this group what is there. I mean, I was very surprised when I first, researching on Gambia, that there is a pretty high penetration of mobile phones, right? So, what are those things that are there which you are leveraging to build out this open network?
Thank you. Right now in the Gambia, people use their phones to do different things, So I was like, okay, like if people are using their phones to connect to the internet, why we can use that technology to access mobility so that it can be easy for the people of the community and Gambia at large.
So
Yes.
it is based on a mobile first kind
Yes.
of, which it is there, everybody using WhatsApp, everybody is more or less connected, and it's a small country. If you look at the Gambia, it's like a sliver of territory. So more or less good coverage. Is that kind of a good characterization?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. We'll come back to this, and I'm sure, think about how interesting it is to start, for somebody like Jainaba to start something from zero, trying to understand what the challenges are. But let me turn to Rajesh, and Rajesh has been my partner in many of these DPI crimes for many years now, and Rajesh has worked on a gamut of issues, including data, and which Ambassador Chinna, you pointed out. Give us a sense, Rajesh, of, you've heard the discussion, you've heard the questions. We are trying, or you are trying to create a new typology, right, of how we look at digital public infrastructure. So give us a sense of that, and then we can do a round of Q&A again.
Sure. Thanks, Anit, and good morning to all. So just reflecting from the room and what some of my speakers also spoke about. So I'll spend less time on theorizing about DPI or digital public infrastructure, but more so about some of the core principles thinking that went into why we designed certain systems in India over the last 10, 12 years in a certain playbook fashion, rather than them being just happy coincidences as such, as well as some of the specific experiences that went into our design so that we ensure inclusivity and participation at a wider scale. Given the diversity and so forth that existed in India, we had to be absolutely certain that any digital public infrastructure efforts had to reach 1 billion or plus people. It couldn't be just limited to, say, 300 million people living in the middle class or the upper elites and so forth and all. So for us, even when we set out, and I happen to be part of a group of philanthropic happy volunteers who wanted to be part of these kind of societal transformations in India ever since the advent of Aadhaar. So some of our core learnings and thinking that went into this entire design of this journey has been to look at it to solve problems at a societal scale in 3 parts. So the first important question for us was, for any individual to meaningfully participate in a country's economic future, solving for identity is critical. So we essentially said, for us, the layer 1 has to be identity, which essentially says, who am I? How do I participate in this economic endeavor of the country and so forth? But that being said, while I have that, I also start thinking about the next important question, like what assets can I use to participate in this economic future? So we looked at identity as a layer, then we looked at assets as a layer. So that's kind of like shifting the narrative from who am I to what exactly is mine, my health record, my bank account, my data asset, and so forth and all. And that thinking has delved into a lot of the decisions we have made in India over the past 10, 12 years. What we have been increasingly doing over the past 5 years in particular, ever since the unified payment interface effort in India, has been to solve for the third important transformation lever, which is the transaction layer. Now, what that basically means is, if I've solved for my identity question, if I've solved for my core assets that I can hold, the third piece could be like, how do I meaningfully engage each one of you to generate value for me, right? So that's essentially talking about transactions between individuals, between enterprises, between me and the state, and so forth and all. So we had a good kickstart with the payments effort, which has shown dramatic improvements over the past 5-6 years. What we've increasingly started to do is take a look at that payments model in particular. It was critical for us to not look at another big platform design effort in the country, because we increasingly were of the opinion that centralization wasn't necessarily the answer. You couldn't leave it to a few custodians to solve for such a big, diverse country, for everybody in the country and so forth. And also, we wanted to focus on decentralization, which is the reason why we started taking the shift from platforms, large platforms, to more universal, interoperable, open protocols. It started with the payments one. So the UPI effort in India is actually a protocol, which essentially meant that if everybody were to follow a singular vocabulary, then it could lead to multitude of assets and platforms and tech efforts to all use the same vocabulary to, again, generate value for their end consumers, which are like citizens like us and so forth. We have taken that thinking forward into several other efforts where we're looking at that platform thinking and moving towards a protocol mindset and trying to solve for, say, commerce, health, and so forth and all. So what it essentially told us was that critical tech principles, when applied to societal transformations, like interoperability, data portability, and so forth, cannot be afterthoughts in that design. It should be designed for right from the very beginning. So you solve for interoperability, or you think about interoperability right at the beginning, which essentially, Ambassador, is going back to the original first principles of the internet itself, that we were always like this for the past 20-30 years when we solve for emails, solve for telecom interoperability and so forth. But when it came to digital commerce transactions, somehow, collectively as a society, we started believing in the platform economy more and more. What we're trying to do in India right now is to decentralize that and bring in this protocol thinking and look at large, open, interoperable networks rather than a few players alone controlling or monopolizing a specific market segment and so forth. So I'll dwell deeper into that and take some of the questions, but this is essentially in a nutshell, the kind of effort that we are trying to set out to do.
Thank you, Rajesh. I think, again, this is the thinking. I think the main idea, and we've been together for now, like doing the same things for about 10, 12 years. And a lot of what we are putting to you and for reflection is some of the lessons that we have learned. But again, contextualizing that for different contexts. For example, in Ethiopia or in the Gambia or here in Rwanda, I think that is the challenge now. One of the things that we've been discussing is how the UPI and the PIX in Brazil are kind of similar, but they have a little bit of a difference because one is just a closed kind of bank-led system, and where UPI is a completely protocol-based. So even within these new models of payments, there are different examples and different thinking. But let me open the floor, and you have been very patient, sir. Why don't you go ahead, and if there's any reflection on what Jainaba and Rajesh said, and then we will come back.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shem. I'm originally from Ethiopia, currently based in the US, former economist at the Carnegie Endowment, and currently working in the space of e-commerce and data analytics consultant. My question for the panelists is related to emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, robotics, or the use of drones. What do you think is the role of these emerging technologies in some of the issues that you're talking about? Financial inclusion for women, social protection, or identity, especially in the context of your countries. And if you have to identify few emerging technologies that you think will have the most transformative impacts in your industries, which of these technologies are? Thanks.
Let me gather a few. So AI in tech, I think we would have come to that, but thank you for teeing that up. I mean, it's the buzzword. Don't know how long it will last, but yeah, I think we should address that, and we'll come back. Let's have a few reflections.
Well, thank you. Good morning. My name is Ricardo Late. I'm the CEO of IDARE. the International Digital Health and Artificial Intelligence Research Collaborative, the buzzword. And I'm also a former member of parliament and president of Unite, the Parliamentarians Network for Global Health, which is a network of current and former parliamentarians from 97 countries focusing on health. And I really appreciated many of the stories that were here shared. And picking up on your last point on designing from start, I think this is a critical aspect. We've seen in many parts of the world how many countries or regions are suffering from pilotitis, where we're constantly doing pilots that never lead to anything. Designing from start is critical to ensure scalability. My first question is regarding policy. Of all of the things we've discussed, do you believe that policy frameworks designed from the start are also critical? And I would like to hear your thoughts on that. My second question, following up on what Silvana was mentioning on data ownership, I'd love to hear a response to the question on how we balance the need for tech development. But also, one of the things we've noticed is that although financial data is highly sensitive, we all value the banks holding onto our money, people seem to value even more their health data. And I would like to hear how you all are dealing with this issue, if you have any experience in that space. And a comment on the taxation issue. I think that we need to use AI precisely to determine what is the optimal threshold. If we go over that optimal threshold, we've seen that in the past, even before digital, people will go into the black market very quickly. And so it's part of human nature. And so thank you.
Excellent. Yes, sir.
I'm from Sri Lanka. I work for the government. My question is the digital public infrastructure's ownership, whether there should be some sort of government ownership considering the national security and other aspects, and whether we can go for a fully liberalized software as a service or infrastructure as a service by a totally outsourcing model. What do you think?
Yeah, can I?
Yes,
just quickly.
Yeah, please.
Last year during the Risina, I heard the same concept about data ownership. Today, Ashish, you mentioned that today. Thank you. In baby English words, if it is, I read 20 sentences of an insurance contract, and I consent to give my data for X, Y, Z, and you don't understand why, and you tick the box, it's not new. Right. So what India has done differently that we can copy?
Right. Okay, excellent. I'm again mindful of time. We have about 8 minutes to go around. I think 3 issues that came up, right? And one is this emerging tech and AI, of course. Ricardo, you've been very kind when I said it's the new fashion, but please don't get me wrong. It is important. Ashi, would you like to take that, and then I'll come to you, Amici.
So I'd like to answer your question on how AI can help social protection and financial inclusion. So I'd like to give a very strong and a small example. Now, after COVID, almost every country has started to build 1,800 or more than that social protection programs. And the next thing is to build adaptive social protection programs in which we identify who are the most vulnerable and who are the most needy, because we cannot go with one size fits all approach, because there are parts of population where the frequency of droughts or floods are more, and so on and so forth. So for that, artificial intelligence can play a strong role where we can create vulnerability index. We can identify, we can take patterns of climate change, we can merge those with social protection databases and identify what is the population that is living in such areas, and what would be the right way to reach out to them, and also in deciding entitlement. So some of those things can be taken care of. Other than that, there is a strong thing called grievance resolution mechanism, where you identify what are the problems that people are facing. So I think artificial intelligence can play a very strong role, because not everybody understands one language. So using AI, you can transform language, you can code it in such a way that anybody using local languages can convey their problems instantly. So those are some of the things that I can quickly think of how AI can transform social protection. And also with regards to agriculture, I'd just like to talk about one program that we are doing, in which we are merging different databases in India to prepare our agri-stack, where all farmer services can be routed through one platform, whether it is related to inputs, fertilizers, social subsidies, market linkages, and everything. So I think AI, technology, will only continue to grow and evolve social protection, financial inclusion.
Can I?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I just wanted to tee up, just 1 second, Rajesh. Amitji, I mean, this thing of the policy framework, right? Very briefly, if you can explain that, just about 2 minutes.
Sure. So I think I will combine 3 questions from you, and sir, from you, right, on the data, right, how to do the data exchange and still serve the public without compromising on the data security. So my whole learning is from Nordic Institute of Interoperability in Europe. They have an open source tool called Xroad, and from there, the genesis of my whole thought process is. So I will give you example, probably that will help you to understand. If an accident happened on the road, and someone jumped the red light on the road, and there is a policeman who wants to give a chit or a fine to this person, what data this person need? So in the current scenario, they will see the driving license. The person doesn't need to see the driving license. All that person need is that is this person is legally allowed to drive this vehicle at this point in time or not. That means I can mask the blood group, the address, the gender, only the identity, date of expiry of the driving license, and the type of vehicle the person is driving. Answer is no. I don't need even these 3 information. It doesn't matter if the person is allowed to drive a commercial vehicle or a private vehicle. The question is what vehicle this person is driving right now. I just need answer in yes and no. So in my system, IT system, I will send 2 information saying that this identity is driving right now car. Is he allowed to drive is today. I am not even bothered with it expiring tomorrow. So I didn't share any data. Still the business decision has been taken. Similarly, if you look at the lending part, I don't need to see the bank statement. Why do I need to? I need to have just find my logic of giving the credit. So what you do, you don't share a discrete data. First you convert into the block. You decide for that specific purpose, what information has to be shared, not data. And then you share the information. So it's a difficult one, but it has already been done. And I'm a big fan of this Nordic Institute of Interoperability, the way they have designed the whole thing. And it is open standard, it is open source, anyone can use it. Thank you.
Great, wonderful. I think 2 questions that came, and I wanted to ask Jainaba something like, AI is a big fad, and the person sitting beside you or to your left is an AI specialist, and so if you want to get some more tips on how you can use AI for a vaccination and building large systems, you can talk to her. But I think more importantly, it's about learning these new technologies, right? And Jainaba, what surprised me was how quickly she said, okay, I get this. This is a protocol. I get GitHub. And what was very surprising for Rajesh and I was, she said, yeah, I mean, we have a Discord channel. And then we were like, oh, you have a Discord channel for that? So I think I wanted to just quickly ask you how, from somebody who's building it from scratch, how easy or difficult it is to learn this? Do you learn this in the university? How did you learn the protocol to be able to use it?
Yeah, actually, I started learning this when I noticed that AI can make lives easy for people and accessible. So with this open protocol that we want to focus on, is that to make sure that opportunities are available for people and accessibility, and so that sorry.
Yeah, no, I think,
sorry, this is my first.
Yeah, it's okay. No, I wanted to ask you, what is different between your university course and the protocol that you learned? So what's the big difference? Just give me 1 sentence.
Actually, in the university, we're not doing anything related to open protocols. We don't learn anything about open protocols. We don't have any course that related to open protocols. So I have opportunity to learn it with this Bacon team that is actually getting us through on how we can use it to make life easy for people. Yes.
That's also something that we are figuring out, that as we take this design thinking to different countries, the basic human resources needed to run a digital public infrastructure at the scale at a population scale is sometimes not available instantly. You have to really build it. And that's the dirty work that all of us need to do. When it works, it's great. And Rajesh, I would invite you to close it to a call to action on what you would like to do and take this forward in Africa.
Yeah, sure. Maybe can I take a quick few seconds on some of the questions posed? Because those are like, oh, I'm sorry. She had a question.
You had a question? Oh, I'm so sorry. Please do go ahead. We have really little time, so
yes,
yeah,
no,
just
I
a quick
just have
question.
one quick. I'm so sorry about
No.
this. Yeah. So there's a lot of investment which has gone into the infrastructure, and rightfully, because there is so much benefit that we can see. My question is that can this infrastructure be used for other purposes as well? Yeah, because there is so much in our experience that we have seen is still required. For example, during the pandemic, so we work with children with visual impairment across the country, and we found while all the schools for the regular children went on the mobile immediately online classes, our children went on a long holiday for 2 years.
Very, very true.
So
very true.
can they?
Yeah, absolutely. Rajesh, you can take that as well.
Yeah. In fact, I'll just try to summarize on why we actually look to focus on investing in DPI, digital public infrastructure, the way forward, especially how do we accommodate all these changes in the emerging tech world, and try to make it like soft interventions, incremental in fashion, rather than massive changes at a societal level, because big changes are essentially difficult for societies to accommodate. So one thing that we have learned in India is when we want to introduce an intervention, we tend to follow something called the +1 thinking, right? So 2 small interventions. For us to change the education digital education landscape in India, for us the first step was not to build yet another massive system in the country, but to put a simple, frugal instrument like a QR code on a textbook. So all of the textbooks in India actually have a QR code. Now, what that QR code actually does is it's just like a window to a content universe, right? So what we learned from that was students, and even more so than students, teachers started spending more time on their textbooks, preparing for the next day's lessons over time. So those are the kind of investments or interventions we seek to do with DPIs. It's the same thing with the COVID vaccination. So like India was one of the first to actually come out with the COVID vaccination credential. And when we designed it, we were very clear of the fact that it cannot be an instrument which is only available to a few people who have smartphones. The reason why we created that QR code, which is again secure, which actually has your vaccination status, but also portable on paper, essentially was to make sure that we believe that pretty much more than 1 billion people would be vaccinated. You hand out those instruments to people in a form factor that they can easily use, right? So it could be as simple as printing it on paper and giving it to them. So those are the kind of frugal +1 interventions we seek to do, along with a strong policy backbone, because the policy framework is what sets out the trajectory of all these investments into the future. So it's critical, especially when we look at something like data empowerment and so forth. So just speaking on to what one of my colleagues actually spoke about. So when we look to solve for data portability and empowerment, we had the policy backbone in India first. So we came out with a blueprint called DEPA. The idea of that was to bring portability as a critical principle. So you make data exportable in simple portable instruments like digital credentials. Yeah, you can share information, right? You make another important principle like consent critical for any information sharing need, right? So the holder's consent should always be there before you share information. All of that is important in, say, use cases like, say, health and so forth, when you're trying to ship records and so forth. So these instruments, I mean, they don't necessarily look like big technology advancements, but then like these are something that can have an impact on a population scale. Along with that, even when we look at some emerging tech like AI, so some of the things that we've done in AI, just stretching upon what my colleague Arshi said, I mean, to you, sir, like it would be useful if we could want to take a look at what India is trying to do with AI. So India is trying to create its own language model in AI, right? So our first intervention in AI was in law and justice. So what we basically did was we created a language model based on judicial documents, because the thing that people are struggling with the most was access to justice and legal literacy and so forth and all, right? So we created one using that. Then we added a layer of chat GPT, because that seemed to be very popular in itself, and it could solve for this conversation between the consumer and the engine at the back, and then made it available through, say, an interface like WhatsApp and so forth. What countries could do is try to create its own native instruments like language models and DPI infrastructure, which suits for its own diversity and needs along the time.
Thanks, Rajesh. We can take this conversation to the dinner table, lunch table, whatever, and Shubh is here, so I know time is up.